Dear viewers, gather round, for today we shall be plunging into a rather scandalous omission from the so-called Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection. You see, while NetherRealm and their archival partners at Digital Eclipse would have you believe that their shiny new museum piece faithfully preserves the classic era of the saga in its entirety, the reality is that a rather important chapter has been torn out of the book and quietly tossed aside. I am of course referring to Mortal Kombat Gold, the Dreamcast exclusive that did not merely replicate the arcade's antics of Mortal Kombat 4, but in many ways refined them, polished them, and presented what could quite easily be described as the definitive home incarnation of that game. Yet, in this latest compilation, it has been erased as though it never existed, denied its rightful place amongst the canon. So in today's upload, not only are we going to celebrate why this one is so important, but also delve into the sad reality as to why it's been left out of the Legacy Collection altogether. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Big Daddy Top Hat here. This is Mortal Kombat Gold, the outrageous snub in Legacy Collection. Yeah! If, like me, you prefer your retro collections loud, lavish, and loaded with goodies, then you'll be pleased to know that the Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection is in the hands of Digital Eclipse, the unrivaled masters of giving the past a second life. These are the very same magicians who assembled the superb Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Cowabunga collection, 13 shell-kicking classics bundled together with artwork, design notes, and all manner of behind-the-scenes delights. If anyone can drag Mortal Kombat's arcade heyday back into the spotlight with style, it's these conjurers. And on that note, you can pick up the Cowabunga collection through my links for a frankly ridiculous 78% off. While you're at it, there are equally eye-watering discounts on Shredder's Revenge, Streets of Rage 4, Street Fighter 6 with its Season 1 and 2 Fighters Pass, and even a snazzy Season 3 Pass giving you cheap access to Sagat. So go ahead, scoop up the bargains, then join me as we prise open the coffin of one of Mortal Kombat's rarest and most overlooked incarnations, Mortal Kombat Gold. To understand the true importance of Mortal Kombat Gold, one must first cast one's mind back to the turn of the millennium, a time when Sega's Dreamcast came crashing onto shop shelves with all the pomp and ceremony of a revolutionary device destined to drag the industry into a bold new age. September the 9th, 1999, that hallowed launch day in North America delivered a smorgasbord of titles designed to showcase the system's prowess, and among them sat Midway's latest foray into bloody theatrics. Yet unlike the hasty, compromised conversions that often accompanied new hardware launches, Mortal Kombat Gold stood tall as a Dreamcast exclusive released in tandem with the machine itself. But let us make one thing abundantly clear, this was no mere port. This was not the Mortal Kombat 4 you may have seen limping awkwardly onto the Nintendo 64, or groaning under the weight of load screens on the PlayStation. No, this was, as it was so aptly described at the time, an enhanced version of Mortal Kombat 4, what could have been the definitive evolution of the classic era. A version that went beyond simply transferring assets, instead embracing the full might of Sega's new Silicon and using it to craft a sharper, smoother, more formidable experience. Indeed, in terms of sheer fidelity, the game was impressive. It boasted character models built to mirror the arcade's 3,000 polygon designs, though later analysis suggests these were in fact optimized versions of the original arcade geometry. Regardless, on the Dreamcast they strutted and clashed with even greater fluidity, running at a smooth 60 frames per second compared to the arcade's 57. It was, in short, the most faithful realisation of Midway's bloody vision, a Dreamcast jewel that proved the new machine was capable of hosting the definitive Mortal Kombat experience, and yet, bizarrely, it is the very jewel that has been left unpolished and hidden away in the vaults of history. Of course, what truly distinguished Mortal Kombat Gold from its immediate predecessor was not merely its sharper visuals or silky frame rate, but the way it expanded the very cast of combatants themselves. Where Mortal Kombat 4 had left fans grumbling about omissions, Gold sought to mend those wounds by restoring 6 familiar faces to the fray: Kitana, Mileena, Cyrax, Kung Lao, Baraka, and tucked away as a hidden treat, the robotic menace of Sector. Their presence alone would be enough to earn applause, yet Eurocom and Midway did not simply dump the old warriors into the roster as nostalgic fan service. They were fighters who also came with completely new cinematic endings that expanded the series' storyline. This in turn granted Mortal Kombat Gold a weight within the lore that stretched beyond its reputation as an upgraded port. These endings were not frivolous extras, but narrative bricks laid into the great bloody edifice of the Mortal Kombat saga. Nowhere was that clearer than with Scorpion, whose climactic tale in Gold directly set up Deadly Alliance, the next great chapter in the franchise. In other words, the Dreamcast exclusive was not simply tinkering at the margins, but actively shaping canon, quietly linking the late 90s arcade era to the grand PlayStation 2 revival that would follow. And yet, despite this clear significance, the so-called Legacy Collection pretends that none of it ever happened. If the enriched roster was not enough to convince players that Mortal Kombat Gold was more than a mere reissue, then its expanded gameplay mechanics certainly hammered the point home. Chief among these was the new Weapon Select feature, which allowed fighters to choose from the full arsenal of blades, hammers and exotic implements before the first punch was even thrown. Unlike Mortal Kombat 4, where weapons were tied to specific costumes, here the choice was yours. A small but significant change that shifted strategy to the character select screen itself. By baking strategic choice into the pre-match ritual and marrying it with dynamic arenas that encouraged improvisation, Mortal Kombat Gold elevated the brutality into something approaching theatre, a deadly dance in which every weapon, every stone, every disembodied skull could become the instrument of victory. And as if expanded rosters and deepened mechanics were not enough, Mortal Kombat Gold further indulged its audience with secrets and hidden delights. The kind of arcane trinkets that gave late 90s fighters their enduring mystique. The most celebrated gateway into this treasure chest was a cheat menu, accessed by sacred incantations of controller inputs on the title screen. Key in the sequence and you would be rewarded not with a mere visual confirmation, but with the booming voice of the announcer himself declaring "outstanding," a soundbite that instantly assured you of your entry into a clandestine world of options, codes and chaos. Within this hidden vault lay the means to unlock some of Mortal Kombat's most iconic warriors. Towering bosses and secret assassins could be brought into the fold, from the hulking Goro to the spectral noob Cybot, from the cybernetic Sector to the morbidly comic curiosity known as Meat. The latter, delightfully absurd in both concept and execution, could be earned only through perseverance. Such challenges lent the game a sense of playground legend, as whispers of unlocked conditions spread among players like contraband knowledge. Even the franchise's trademark fatalities were given a fresh twist, with accessibility trumping execution. By toggling the right option in this hidden menu, the most gruesome finishes could be performed with a single button press. To quote the instruction outright, press high punch, perform their first fatality. What had once demanded encyclopedic memory and flawless inputs could now be triggered at will, allowing even the clumsiest novice to bask in the cathartic glory of a decapitation. Thus, beneath its polished surface, Mortal Kombat Gold contained a labyrinth of secrets that made it feel alive, unpredictable and endlessly replayable. It was a game that practically dared its players to dig deeper, and rewarded them handsomely when they did. As briefly touched on earlier, beyond its roster and stylistic flourishes, Mortal Kombat Gold also stood as a technical showcase, a gleaming demonstration of what Sega's Dreamcast could deliver in the dying days of the 20th century. Mortal Kombat Gold runs at 60 frames per second with a 640 by 480 resolution, even higher than the Mortal Kombat 4 coin-op. This alone places the title in a rarefied category. The technical braggery did not stop there though. The system pumped out over 1 million polygons per second, close to 1.5 million at times, at that 60 frames, ensuring that the arenas were crisp, characters smooth and animation fluid in a way few contemporaries could rival. Throw in bilinear filtering and coloured lighting effects, and what you had was an aesthetic leap forward that lent the game a lustre absent from its Nintendo 64 and PlayStation cousins. Perhaps most striking for players at the time, however, was what was missing: loading screens. Unlike its CD-based rivals, Mortal Kombat Gold sprang to life with virtually no interruptions. As the promotional boast went, Dreamcast Mortal Kombat Gold does not load at all. You'll never catch now loading, a claim that for once was not marketing hyperbole, but cold, hard truth. And then there was the matter of post-launch support, an almost alien concept in the late 1990s. The infamous Red Disc revision, released as version 2.0 in October 1999, fixed earlier crashes, tightened memory card saving, and smoothed over rough edges. The new pressing, identifiable with a red tinted disc with a green hot new sticker, is the one to grab. In this sense, Mortal Kombat Gold was not only technically ahead of its peers, but even flirted with modern notion of patch culture, long before such practices became an industry standard. So if you are looking to pick up a physical copy of the game for yourself, you might want to pay attention to which version you are actually paying for. But there's more reasons to love this one beyond its technical sophistication. No great Mortal Kombat game would be complete without its distinctive auditory identity, and Mortal Kombat Gold carried that torch with surprising fidelity as the franchise leapt from 2 dimensions into 3. Longtime composer Dan Toasty Forden himself described the musical palette of the era as a heady concoction of ethnic drumming, synthetic basses, and exotic instruments, a blend that gave a series a soundscape as unmistakable as its fountains of digital gore. Where other fighters of the time often succumbed to anonymous guitar loops or forgettable techno, Gold clung to the strange and atmospheric, crafting a sonic backdrop that reinforced Mortal Kombat's otherworldly brutality. For this reason, even in contemporary assessments, the game was praised for preserving that unique auditory DNA. While the Dreamcast's technical muscle ensured that every crunch, scream and sickening splatter rang out with crisp clarity, it was the strange marriage of pounding drums and eerie melodies that ensured Mortal Kombat Gold felt like more than just another fighter with a new coat of paint. It sounded like Mortal Kombat Gold, and that perhaps more than any polygon count proved that the soul of the series had survived a transition into the so-called 128-bit generation. Of course, no discussion of Mortal Kombat Gold would be complete without mention of the Phantom Fighter who nearly was, Belloc. Unlike the shadowy whispers of Playground myth, this one was very real, a hulking demonic warrior who came within an air's breadth of appearing on the Dreamcast's disc. His existence slipped into the public eye when 6 leaked in-engine shots surfaced after an accident at Eurocom, showing the character fully modelled and tantalisingly close to completion. Community research generally places him at around 90% complete, unfinished yes, but close enough to haunt the imagination of fans decades later. So why, you may ask, was this fearsome combatant excised from the final roster? The answer lies not in technical limitations but in creative politics. Belloc was cast aside at the 11th hour. Midway themselves pulled the plug, citing that the character was not created by the Mortal Kombat designers, and thus unworthy of admission into the official pantheon. In other words, Belloc was condemned not by his lack of readiness but by questions of legitimacy, the dubious crime of being born outside the sacred inner circle. Speaking of things being missing, this now brings us to the elephant in the room, the so-called Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection, that grand museum of digitised violence which claims to be the definitive archive of the series' early years. You might imagine that such a project, marketed as a monument to preservation, would leap at the chance to include Mortal Kombat Gold, the definitive rendition of Mortal Kombat 4. Yet instead, we are met with hand-wringing and excuses. Digital Eclipse themselves have gone on record conceding, do we like Mortal Kombat Gold? Yes. Should you expect it? No. We're just not ready to do it yet. This mealy-mouthed dithering naturally sent fans into a frenzy of speculation. The very phrasing, with its coy nods to the future, was read by many as a deliberate tease. That word choice kind of implies Mortal Kombat Gold via DLC. But such vague promises have done little to calm the community, particularly when one considers what has been included in the collection. For a while, Gold, which players openly describe as their holy grail, has been ignored. The curators found room for WaveNet Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, an arcade experiment played by fewer than 100 people. The irony could not be more stark. As for the rationale behind this exclusion, the technical alibi has been trotted out more than once. We are told that the Dreamcast architecture is a very difficult thing to emulate, but such hesitation rings hollow in an age where fan-built emulators already run the game with tolerable ease. No, the real obstacles, by the developer's own admission, lie elsewhere. Licensing first, legal second, tech third. It is potentially the tangled web of rights and ownership that has kept Mortal Kombat Gold in chains, rather than the silicon limitations of a console long consigned to history. In short, we are left with a bizarre paradox. The version of Mortal Kombat 4 most worthy of preservation is precisely the one being airbrushed out of existence, sacrificed on the altar of corporate entanglement and curatorial cowardice, which is a shame to say the very least. What makes this exclusion all the more galling is that it flies directly in the face of the lofty rhetoric that Digital Eclipse themselves so often trumpet. Time and again they have declared that their mission is to construct a curated museum and an archive of everything we get our hands on. A noble ambition to be sure, but one rendered rather farcical when an entire Dreamcast exclusive, one that both refined Mortal Kombat 4 and contributed crucial pieces of lore, is left rotting in the vaults. The contradiction becomes even starker when one recalls the words of Frank Cifaldi, one of Preservation's most vocal champions, who confidently proclaimed, "We have not had a situation yet where we've wanted to tell a story and have not been able to find cool things to tell that story. And yet here we stand, confronted with a glaring omission, as though Mortal Kombat Gold has somehow been deemed unworthy of remembrance. The gap speaks volumes, not about the quality of the game, but about the selective nature of what passes for Preservation when commercial convenience comes knocking. This is not merely a matter of fanboy indignation, but of cultural record. As one preservationist warning chillingly put it, vital pieces of our technological and cultural history risk being lost forever. To deny Mortal Kombat Gold its rightful place in the archive is to allow precisely that loss, a willful erasure of a game that dared to push the series forward at a crucial juncture. It is, in short, the very antithesis of preservation. Now, of course, the apologists will rear their heads with predictable retorts. Some sneer that Mortal Kombat Gold does not deserve a place in the pantheon because it wilted when placed beside Soul Calibur, the Dreamcast's undisputed crown jewel. And indeed, one reviewer of the era scoffed that on a console that had Soul Calibur, it looked sloppy. But such criticism is hardly a fair trial. Any fighter would pale when compared directly to the technical marvel of Namco's masterpiece. To dismiss Gold on those grounds is akin to deriding a classic novel because it happened to be published in the same year as Shakespeare. The brilliance of one does not render the other historically disposable. Then there is the tide line that Mortal Kombat Gold need not be preserved because it already lurks in the wilds of emulation. Yet this argument betrays a fundamental misunderstanding of preservation itself. A scattered collection of ROMs and half-functional builds is not history safeguarded. It is history on life support. True preservation means context, documentation, and accessibility. It means placing the game within its rightful lineage, complete with endings, costumes, cut content, and the significance it carried at the time. It is not enough for a few enthusiasts to cobble the game together in back alleys of the internet. Preservation must be public, deliberate, and permanent, and that is precisely what the Legacy Collection pretends to be, but fails spectacularly at points when it fails to deliver games like Mortal Kombat Gold. If further proof was needed of Mortal Kombat Gold's importance, one need only consult the community itself, who for years have described the game in hushed, reverent tones as the ultimate version of Mortal Kombat 4, and more tellingly, their very holy grail. This is not some obscure curiosity championed only by a handful of eccentric collectors. It is a Dreamcast title, with a reputation so enduring that its omission feels less like an oversight and more like an insult. The frustration has only grown with the way questions about Gold have been handled by those tasked with preserving the series. Fans have accused Digital Eclipse not merely of silence, but of outright gaslighting, downplaying its significance or hinting at vague futures that never seem to arrive. Thus, the very people who should be most invested in celebrating and remembering Mortal Kombat Gold, the players who lived through its release, and those who discovered it later as a hidden gem, are left shouting into the void, their voices ignored while inferior oddities receive a spotlight. A community that should be celebrating preservation instead finds itself questioning whether preservationists even understand what is worth preserving. When all is said and done, Mortal Kombat Gold was no mere side project or half-hearted upgrade, but the definitive incarnation of Mortal Kombat 4. It was technically advanced, with its smooth 60 frames and crisp Dreamcast presentation. It was narratively important, stitching together threads that would carry the series into Deadly Alliance, and it was mechanically refined. In every meaningful respect, it was the perfected version of a divisive chapter, proof that even in its awkward transition to 3D, Mortal Kombat could still dazzle. And yet, despite all of this, the Legacy Collection insists on ignoring it, parading itself as a historical archive while leaving one of the most important entries to gather dust. In doing so, it undermines its very premise, for a museum that picks and chooses which relics to display is not safeguarding history, but instead rewriting it. Do not forget that through my links you can pick up the Cowabunga collection at a frankly ridiculous 78% off. While you're at it, there are equally eye-watering discounts on Shredder's Revenge, Streets of Rage 4, Street Fighter 6 of its Season 1 and 2 Fighters Pass, and even a snazzy Season 3 Pass giving you cheap access to Sagat. So go ahead, scoop up some bargains and add to your personal Legacy collection. Happy shopping, and I'll see you all again in the next video.